Hello, and welcome to the Discipline Healing Tips video for patch 4.0.3a of Cataclysm. This video was created on December 20th, 2010 as a supplement to the text guide that can be found on the WoW forums at the address in the description. Minor changes will be updated in the text guide, and so this video will be considered up to date as long as no major changes to the playstyle come about. If you are searching for advice on how to spec your character, what glyphs to use, what gear to aim for, or how to reforge, these questions are all answered in the text guide. This video will primarily be an expansion on the rotation and spells section of the guide as a visual aid to see how Discipline works in practice. Previously, Power Word Shield was our primary go-to heal. If it was available to use, you would use it. However, this is no longer the case. In terms of the amount healed via absorption, it's only slightly higher than casting a heal, at a much more significant mana cost. However, since Rapture returns 6% of your total mana, it does mean that anytime Rapture procs, Power Word Shield is effectively a free heal that also gives you a net gain in mana. What this effectively means in terms of healing versus mana cost is that you want to use Shield only when you will get Rapture back from it. Or, to put it another way, only use Shield every 12 seconds if you can help it. Power Word Shield does provide another buff in addition to Rapture, however, and that's the Weakened Soul debuff. Whenever your target has Weakened Soul up, you will get an additional 10% chance to crit that target thanks to Renewed Hope. Weakened Soul has a 15-second duration, so it is beneficial to do what you can to reduce it to as close to 12 seconds as possible. The only way to do so is through Strength of Soul, which makes all your heal spells reduce the cooldown by 2 or 4 seconds depending how many points you put into it. The text guide suggests putting 1 point into the talent to reduce the duration by 2 seconds per cast, and I'd largely recommend simply casting a single heal spell at some point after putting up shield to reduce the Weakened Soul duration. You'll need to use this heal spell somewhere between about 4 and 14 seconds left on the duration of Weakened Soul to get the biggest benefit out of it. If you'd like, you can reduce the duration to 11 seconds, but anything more than that is actually detrimental to your healing. Because Power Word Shield is one of our least efficient, effective healing spells, you don't want to use it more often than the necessary 12 seconds to gain Rapture. As a result, you want Weakened Soul up as long as possible to benefit from the increased chance to crit. Therefore, if you reduce the Weakened Soul duration too far, you'll lose your crit benefit, and your shield will be available too early, causing you to miss that round of Rapture proccing when it becomes available again. As a result, instead of using Heal on your primary tank target, you'll want to use Penance or Greater Heal once he's missing enough health to warrant either. You always want to keep an eye on overhealing, so don't worry about healing tanks that are above about 90% health with Penance or Greater Heal, unless there's some mechanic that would warrant it. The heal spell heals for about as much as 1/3 of a Greater Heal cast, by the way, for just under 1/3 of the mana cost. As a result, without any talents to back these abilities up, heal is just slightly more efficient than Greater Heal. However, because of the talent's Train of Thought and Inner Focus, approximately every 6 or 7 Greater Heals will be free to cast, with an increased 25% chance to crit. And that's assuming you're spamming Greater Heal. As a result, if you use Inner Focus on cooldown, then Greater Heal actually pulls ahead in terms of efficiency. This is why Greater Heal effectively replaces your heal spell for direct tank heals once you've reduced the duration on Weakened Soul. Penance, however, is the most efficient single-target healing spell in the game. It will put up 3 stacks of Grace immediately and has 3 rapid casts, which give it an increased chance to crit and proc Inspiration. Penance also will not suck up the borrowed time buff you receive for a short time after casting Power Word Shield. This makes the ideal time to use Penance right after casting Power Word Shield. You will get the hasted Penance, then have the haste buff still left over for a Greater Heal cast with Inner Focus. If you aren't using the Smite spec, that essentially covers your single target healing. Try to break 1 shield every 12 seconds, use 1 or 2 heal spells to reduce the duration of Weakened Soul appropriately, then otherwise use Penance or Greater Heal once the target is missing enough health that you won't overheal. If you are using the Smite spec, then if your target does not need the large heals from Penance or Greater Heal, you now have time to toss out a few Smites. The Atonement heal will cover any minor damage incurred by nearby targets without moving your stacks of Grace, as well as stack up Evangelism. Evangelism is the important part of using Smite. Not only does it make your Smite hit harder and cost less, such that it becomes about as efficient as using the heal spell, but it makes your Penance cheaper to cast as well. Similarly, having 5 stacks of Evangelism gives you a 15% healing cooldown available in the form of Archangel. As long as you smite roughly every 15 seconds or so, you can maintain your Evangelism stacks for cheaper penances, efficient heals and damage, and an extra healing cooldown to be used when necessary. For group heals, Discipline Priest used to be able to just start bubbling everything that wasn't the tank and make use of multiple procs of Rapture at once. This is no longer possible. You can only proc Rapture once per 12 seconds, period. As a result, bubble spam is not a viable way to raid or group heal anymore. What is a viable method is to toss out a Prayer of Mending if you expect the AoE damage will be relatively consistent, and then use Prayer of Healing. Prayer of Healing will automatically proc Divine Aegis regardless of whether or not it hits, and it's actually a fairly efficient AoE heal. If only one or two off-targets are missing health, then it's time to decide if they need the healing or not. If you use Atonement or Renew to heal them, then you won't move your Stacks of Grace, which is good. However, if you use Greater Heal or Penance, you'll need to build your Stacks of Grace on the tank again, which can be somewhat time-consuming or less healing efficient. If the off-targets don't really need the healing, then just let them sit at whatever health they're at. They don't need to be topped off most of the time. That covers the basics of healing your group. Again, shield once every 12 seconds, use heal once or twice to reduce weakened soul. Otherwise, use Penance or Greater Heal. Smite for small heals and to build Evangelism. Use Prayer of Healing and Prayer of Mending for group heals. Otherwise, use Smite or Renew for small heals to off-targets if they need to be topped off. If the off-targets need a lot of healing, then feel free to start using Penance or Greater Heal on them, but remember to swap your Stacks of Grace back to the tank when you can. Now that you have your basic rotation down, here are some extra tips for healing heroics and harder raid encounters. You are generally responsible for any damage that is completely unavoidable. This means damage that cannot be interrupted, reduced, or ignored. For example, someone standing in fire is not your fault. At the same time, many enemies will give themselves magic buffs that will cause them to do significantly more damage. If you can dispel them, and you don't, then that can often be considered your fault. I've done many heroics where I'm the only member of the group with an offensive dispel, and you'll just need to keep an eye out. Similarly, many debuffs can be considered unavoidable damage, and you need to be on top of removing the magic and disease ones. Even the ones that don't do damage may actually lead to more damage later on. For example, Static Cling and Heroic Vortex Pinnacle doesn't, in itself, inherently do damage. It does, however, root the target to the ground, and if they can't get to the anti-magic triangle because they're rooted, that's usually your fault. Not using cooldowns that are available to you can also be your fault. Cooldowns are not just made for bosses. Typically, anything that is 3 minutes or less of a cooldown can be rotated through many pulls. Make sure you familiarize yourself with Power Infusion, Pain Suppression, and Power Word Barrier, and use them when the situation is appropriate. Don't be afraid to use your long cooldowns like Divine Hymn or Hymn of Hope on pulls that go bad, or simply have a lot of incoming damage either. That covers the new Discipline healing tips for 4.0.3a. If you would like to read a comprehensive guide on the Discipline spec, you can find the link in the description of this video. All feedback is welcome, and thank you for watching.